known what I wanted to talk about for quite a while, but this last week, I guess the first thing I want to say is be careful what you ask for. Because I really wanted to learn these principles. And so, as it happens, whenever your trend of thinking is on a certain topic, everything seems to fold into that topic. So everything that's been happening lately, I keep applying the fierce mantras. So to put it mildly, I've had a very fierce week. So that's why I say be careful what you ask for. Now, I know this is science of mind, and the fierce mantras are Buddhism. And Randy also did a reading from Zen Buddhism. So, you might ask me why I chose Buddhism. But the thing is, when I studied to be a practitioner, I chose science of mind because I found a philosophy that fit my worldview from studying metaphysics. In fact, I was enrolled in a holistic theology to get my doctorate in holistic theology when I discovered science of mind. And the more I learned about science of mind, I realized that it is big enough to hold all the philosophies and religions, even the worldview of an atheist. And that is something holistic theology wasn't going to give me. Because there is a science to science of mind, and those that say they don't believe in God, they do believe in something. In fact, I found something on the internet the other day. There's a word, it's icism, maybe something like icism. Does anybody know what that is? It's a Dutch word, but it's they say they're atheists, but they believe there is something, some transcendental force behind what the known world, behind what they can know. But they don't subscribe to any one religion or one belief system. And that, to me, says why I can sort of faithfully subscribe to science of mind, because I feel like it's big enough to hold every worldview. So Ernest Holmes is the founder of Science of Mind, and we call him Ernie sometimes familiarly. But he says, and he took he did a lot. He took a lot from Christianity, but also Eastern religions and his teachers. But he always used to focus on this saying of Christ, "What as you believe, it shall be done unto you." And that there is an intelligent law which does unto each as he believes. And measured out according to our own measuring. And for some reason that phrase just really stuck with me. Because we are quite the measurers. Another thing he says, should I bring this up a little bit? Okay. We're a little technologically challenged. So anyway, we humans are always measuring and judging and making decisions and having opinions about that. I got a real week of that too. But we are usually convinced that the key to our happiness is that we have to do something. We have to figure out what to do with our life. And last week, Elaine talked about how we have these plans, right? We have this ideal, the way we think it should be. Everybody should study their major and work in their field and get married young and stay married forever and have 2.5 kids. Well, the thing is that we keep all these shoulds. It's not just about how our life should go. It's about everything that happens, And I've thought this way for a long time. I'm like, what is wrong with us humans that we think we have to say everything is good or bad, everything is right or wrong? We're always judging. Science of mind really calls this transference. They believe science of mind indicates that there is a perfect world and a perfect harmony and universe. There's a perfect natural order, shall I say. Even the scientists know, we are made up of the same thing as stars and trees. We're all made of matter. We're all made of energy. And the same force that's holding the stars in their orbit and causes the trees to grow why not believe that that's also causes our natural unfolding? Anyway, but we're really raised in those kinds of belief systems at all. Because the one thing we do, and we do really well, is judge. And we do it all the time. It's just like chronic. When I first started writing poetry, which is just a few years ago, one of the very first things I wrote, I didn't bring it, but I thought, if I make a collection of poetry, I'm going to call it Dear Eve, because I was like blaming Eve. I'm like, this is really all your fault. Because you made that first judgment, you know, you wanted to know what that was, you know, you questioned God, you thought maybe you could get one up, or, you know, I'm sorry that I'm coughing. Water or something? Yeah. But anyway, in this poem I said, I don't know if I have that quote. Obviously I didn't have really the time to plan that I wanted to, but I do know what I want to talk about, so anyway, thank you all for your levity or your flexibility. I was basically railing against Eve and saying, do you even remember, could you even remember what it was like before, when there was spontaneity and natural order and just unfolding and flowering, and that's organic and perfect. But you made the first judgment, and you know, after that we've been judging ever since. So I think it's chronic. I think we judge ourselves. I'll take myself as an example. We judge ourselves for not being good enough parents, for not working hard enough, or for working too hard, or for not being in the right place at the right time. And then we judge others for their beliefs, their opinions, the way they dress, their ideologies. Like I said, I blame Eve. If you have to blame somebody, at least she's not in front of me. But we don't have a lot of models of what it's like to be truly accepting, to be truly receptive, and to allow and to trust that whatever is occurring is part of a natural order. We are compelled, I think, as human beings, we think we're human doings. You know, we think that we have to do something to make things right and to make them fit our view of how they should be. Well, let's just give some examples. We certainly have plenty of examples all around us of modeling the judgment, and we transfer these thought patterns, our shoulds, our woulds, our coulds, onto reality. So the first fierce mantra of Buddhism is, whatever has to happen, let it happen. And again, maybe that's easier for an Eastern, mentality type person to do. I think it's very difficult for Westerners to let happen what needs to happen, what's going to happen. Probably y'all can think of examples of where you needed to just let what was going to happen happen. Sometimes we knock ourselves out trying to prevent it from happening, and then it ends up happening anyway. And sometimes it's worse because we went through so many machinations to try to stop the inevitable. I'll give you an example. Well, so some people look at this and say, oh, well, you can't let certain things happen. I mean, I do bystander awareness training to protect victims from bigotry, and I used to be a therapist. I was a mandated child abuse reporter. Now, that's not something that I think the Buddhists aren't talking about. We can't let that happen. If there's anything in our power, then we know that we are impelled to right a wrong, as the cover song says, then I think that's our being. That's our sense of being that causes us, that impels us to act when it's ours to do. When it's a thing that's ours to do. When I was a mandated child abuse reporter, I, without question, would report to the authorities when a child told me they'd been abused, physically or sexually, because I had to by law. But it was never a decision, a phone call, I took lightly, because you never knew exactly what was going to happen, and you had to let the system take it from there, and that was always scary, but I didn't have a choice about it. But you know, for some children, they would be removed from an abusive situation. But you know, for others, maybe that was the only family they'd known, and maybe it was a mistake, and it's going to cause them years. That separation, that disruption, may cause them years of suffering. And that's like, I just had to let happen what happened, and I had very little say so. I mostly worried that an abuser would get more violent once the abuse was reported, and he knew he was found out, and that was always the main worry, was for the child. But it's just as an example of having to let what has to happen. Another one is my son recently broke up with his girlfriend of 3 years, and he's 33, and I was really thinking they would get married. I'm ready for more grandchildren. Mine are like teenagers now. But when he told me, he said, "Oh, it's over, Mom, it's over." I had to do this fierce mantra again, right? I'm like, oh, it would be this week, right? You know? But I'm glad it was this week, and I was aware of this fierce mantra, because I think I may have said, "Oh, Graham, I'm so disappointed. I really loved her. I thought y'all were good together. I thought you would," you know? And I would then be laying all of my, the way I thought it should be, the way I thought was the little happy ending. I would be laying that guilt on him in addition to how bad he already feels about the breakup. Now he's going to feel worse because he's also a disappointed mother and robbed her of her grandchildren. Okay, so I'm thankful for these fierce mantras, to a degree. But I'm like, enough already with the lessons, okay? So anyway, that is just an example, I think, of us, the way we judge things and measure things and decide, well, that's not exactly right. Maybe I can change it, or maybe I can insert myself on this and it will change the picture. And mostly we just cloud the picture. And I think that if I were to have said any of those things to Graham, it would have made it worse for him. So I'm sure that I hope that you can think of examples of your own where that's happened and you had to just let what has to happen happen. But the reason I'm talking about these fierce mantras today is that the Buddhist, Randy did a reading about suffering, and the Buddhists these are what they say is the way out of suffering. It's the way through suffering, is the way to stay centered. And when John Stringer was here, as he said, allow, accept, let go. But instead, we say, okay, and this is, whatever the situation is, this next one is, whatever the situation is, it's fine. How much do we do that? I know I'm not great at it. Okay, so here's my son, and now he's got to move out of this apartment because he's going to let her keep the apartment. And he's like, this sucks, this is terrible. Now I have to find a new apartment. Now I have to find new furniture. Now I have to find, and everything is like, it's terrible. It's like, terrible, awful, no good, very bad day. That book, that children's book? Mm-hmm. So, but this is what we do. This is very humanoid, I think, and I keep, and I hear I've got these fierce mantras going in my head all week, so I am like, Graham, what if it's not terrible? What if this needs to happen and you need to be right where you are, right now? I started like almost getting excited, like he always gets my hand-me-down furniture, and I'm like, I've been needing to get rid of that. That lazy boy, or the dog's got it all, like, messed up on it, and I just clean it up a little, it'll be fine for his, and I kind of want a new couch too, So I'm sitting here saying, what if it's just fine? You know, what if you were a couple, and when you were a couple, you were great, and now it's fine that you're single. And my brother said to him, best advice my brother gave the whole time he was here for Thanksgiving. He said, Graham, I hope for you that your next relationship is with yourself. And you know, that you find all the goodness that we see in you, in your own heart, because anyways, but he's been kind of torn up about this relationship, and so I've been trying to not only remind him that maybe it's not terrible. You know, we suffer sometimes as much as we set it up. Some of y'all probably remember the last talk I gave, and my journal told me, like I said, what, am I getting bullied into, like, I had this itching disorder, right? And I kept itching and itching, and I was sort of forcing my way past my fears. And so I'm like, so what, I'm getting bullied into doing the things I know I should be doing? And my little morning pages, I wrote back to myself, is that the way you're setting it up? So the universe is, I mean, that, like, I had to go back to that 2 weeks later and say, what was that again? I'm setting it up. I'm like, yes, we set up our suffering. We decide this is terrible, and then it's gonna be terrible. You know, he's gonna look everywhere for a couch, and he's gonna try, because he's already decided, if he already decides, or when we already decide that this is hard, we make it hard. My daughter did the same thing. She called me this week and said, she was having the worst time at work she's ever had, and it was so hard, and I'm like, what if, I said, I know you, Megan, what if this problem or challenge is just equally matched to your abilities? And it's just a challenge, you know? I don't know. So like I said, I have had these lessons in the fierce mantras like all week long, but I realized that I don't have a lot of experience, and I don't have it modeled for me in a lot of places, that maybe things are fine, just the way they are. That a breakup doesn't have to be bad. Looking for a new apartment doesn't have to be bad. The situation we find ourselves in, Ernest Holmes says, a man is where he is because of what he is. We set up our lives. They're pretty much like we expect them to be. They're pretty much like we set them up. So if we set ourselves up for suffering, we're setting ourselves up for suffering a lot of times. A lot of times. So anyway, that's the second situation, that whatever the situation is, it's fine. This reminds me of the Zen story, and some of you may have heard this before, but I think it's the same concept. That there's this farmer, and he lives alone on his farm and everything, and his one horse runs away. And his neighbors are like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for your misfortune. That's terrible that you lost your horse. His response, maybe. The next day, the horse comes back with 3 wild horses in tow, okay? So the horse made some friends, brought him back. The neighbors are like, oh, this is wonderful. You have 4 horses now. This is great. His response, maybe. The next day, his son tries to ride one of the wild horses and gets thrown off and breaks his leg. The neighbors say, oh, this is terrible. I'm so sorry for your misfortune. His response, maybe. The next day, the military officials come to town, drafting young men into the army, and they pass him by because he's laid up with a broken leg. How fortunate, he says. Maybe. Right? So in the Buddhist way, he kept that equanimity, is that the word? That balance. He wasn't seeing anything as necessarily bad or good. Turned out, whatever the situation was, for him, it was fine. You can call it great or you can call it terrible, but maybe it's just fine. Maybe it's just part of an unfolding order. Things don't end I often think that sometimes that's our problem as a species, you know? We decided that we evolved into humans and we have consciousness, and the animals don't have consciousness, and we have dominion over all the earth, and we're done. You know, and so now we start saying everybody else is right or wrong, or it should be this way or it should be that way, because we are fully evolved. But what if we're not fully evolved? I mean, I think our next level of evolution is to realize that there's an order that's more perfect than the one we can imagine and try to transfer and overlay onto reality. We always think we have to have the perfect apartment or the perfect mate, and maybe whatever we're getting is the perfect experience we need for our unfoldment, but we don't know what that unfoldment looks like. We know what we want it to look like. So, can you relate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So, the last mantra, which this morning things have just gone from, well, I don't want to say bad to worse, because maybe, right? I'm still working on this one, which is that we don't need anything to be happy. Because again, happiness, we think, is about doing something often, right? It's like, or acquiring something, right? If we could just have this, or we could get that, or meet this person, or if it's something that we can do, if we can get it, I have to say this. Sorry, Lane, but she'll listen to this. I don't want it to go on Facebook, but I know she will listen. I guess I have this problem with all religions, but when Science of Mind does it, I want to say, this is not Science of Mind. I sometimes think that we as humans, we say, okay, God, I have this little box right here, and I need you to fill it. And it's just shaped like this. It's not a tall order for a magnificent universe, infinite love and power that you are. Just deliver it, just like I want it. And I think that that's having blinders on. I think that wanting things to be a certain way is just a way of making ourselves suffer. Because it will probably never be exactly like you want it, like you're picturing. But if you were open to the, I want this in my evolution, I want to live this way, then maybe whatever transpires and what happens to you in your life, you can accept and allow and consider that this might be part of your perfect unfolding. That the world will show you and the events will show you what is yours to do. You don't have to go out and try to find something to do. So I don't need anything to be happy. What Science of Mind says, every problem is primarily mental. Let's see what I wrote about this. This is like what I want for my son right now. Again, most of this has been about him. But I want him to realize that he doesn't need a girlfriend to be happy or the right apartment to be happy. But if he could only see in himself what I see in him and what his uncle sees in him. And I have talked to y'all about this book before. Connie Kaplan wrote this, The Invisible Garment. She says that we all have an invisible garment that we wear, and that we carry these principles in our being. And I told her, I said, I think I'm going to read something from your book on Sunday. And is there anything you want me to say? And she said, only to stress that there's nothing that we have to do. We all think we have to do something. And I think it fits with this third mantra. We have to do something to be happy. We have to be more, be different, be better, be stronger, be wiser, and then we'll be happy. And so I wanted to read you, and I'll just close with this, from the principle of purity, because I think this speaks to both Science of Mind and the Zen Buddhist sort of philosophy. Purity is the ability to recognize the essential nature of any form. It is the ability to distill any error that has been attached to a form, whether the error is ideological, psychological, or physiological. Purity is the ability to liberate oneself from patterns of error that are present in perceptual reality, and instead to experience the intent of cosmic order. Purity involves being aware of the blueprint behind form. The only way one can experience the true nature of form is through the eyes of purity. And it goes on. When one perceives through the eyes of purity, the inner result is peace. And through the shift in perception that brings one to purity, that person lives in a perpetually new reality. The things people do in the world take a different level of importance when seen through a purity lens. It can be said, the things I do in the world become statements of my I amness rather than of my who am I-ness. Mm-hmm. So, I guess that's enough. Purity is a transparency that carries us back to our divine origin. That was Meister Eckhart, who's always been one of my favorites. The state of being that preceded original sin, Eve, or the I love it when I see things like that, or the consciousness of dualisms and separations. It signifies our original freedom. When God and the soul unite, the soul strives for the first purity, that is, for its divine origin. So, I guess that's kind of all I wanted to say today. This is why, though, I chose to be a practitioner. Because I want this for everybody, not just for my son. I want it for everybody in this room, everybody on the planet. I think it's our only way, through to a collective evolution, is to recognize that there is divine order and there is grace and allowing and accepting. So that's, as a practitioner, that's what my practice would be. I didn't want to call myself a spiritual coach. That once you get licensed, they want you to pick a title. So I'm a consciousness consultant. But to me, that's all we have to work on, really, is our own consciousness. And if we could get anywhere near those 3 fierce mantras and living our life from a grounded center of being that accepts and allows that there's a perfect order in the universe, and if I could help make that happen, or help, for any of you to see and feel and recognize that unflowering and that flowering or unfolding in yourself, then I would be content. But I don't need anything to be happy. So thank you for your attention. And, I kind of enjoyed this talking to you all.